morning. This is Anna Patterson with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning for our housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Director of Housing Policy, Stephanie Watkins Cruz.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are having a great week so far. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. Some of the top three things that we want to bring to your attention this week. We continue to see a lot of proposed federal budget and policy decisions or initiatives that continue to threaten the future of key housing and community development programs and resources. One such example of this is last week, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, published a proposed rule to rescind the affirmatively furthering fair housing regulations. This proposed rule is open for public comments, and those are due by July 3rd. The second thing we want to bring to your attention is that the State House and Senate have announced their conference committees for state budget negotiations. Again, one of our biggest priorities remains advocating for the full restoration and funding of the Workforce Housing Loan Program, which is a critical affordable housing finance tool that makes housing possible across our entire state. And three, we have a few pieces in the call notes for you to review. Really, that disaster relief for those impacted by Hurricane Helene continues to be held up, and some are using it as leverage in the state budget negotiations process. On the federal budget side, federal budget negotiations continue to threaten the future of housing and community development programs. We are following the House and Senate really closely. They're both currently working to reach top line spending agreements. And so the biggest thing to pull out here is that this is not final, but there is time to influence the House and Senate before they release their respective budgets. We partner and we lean really heavily on our partners at the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, and we are really encouraging folks to reach out to their members of Congress and make sure that they understand the impact that these cuts would have. There are two big resources that are really helpful for your advocacy guidance. The first is a federal budget advocacy toolkit. And the second is a budget chart for fiscal year 2026 that looks at selected federal housing programs and the proposed cuts so far. If you see columns on this chart that are blank, it's because they have not yet released their respective budgets. So again, that means there is still time to advocate. Last week, in an unsurprising move, HUD published a proposed rule to rescind their affirmatively furthering fair housing marketing regulations. If finalized, the rule would remove requirements that ensure that owners of FHA insurance or multifamily housing rental assistance programs use an affirmative fair housing marketing plan to advertise their properties. So this is a actually longstanding, pretty historically uncontroversial rule that's just designed to ensure outreach to all potentially eligible households, especially those least likely to apply for assistance that might still qualify. This is especially important if a development is located in a low poverty area. So this move comes as another blow in a series of efforts by the current administration to gut fair housing infrastructure. If you're interested in providing public comment for this proposed rule, public comments are due on July 3rd. Last week, on the positive side, Congresswoman Alma Adams introduced the American Neighborhoods Protection Act to protect and improve family home ownership opportunities. This bill proposes to do a few different things. It would require corporations that own more than 75 single-family residences to pay $10,000 per home annually into a housing trust fund for down payment assistance grants for families purchasing homes. The proposal, in theory, would lower housing costs, increase housing supply, and provide some additional financial assistance to families looking to buy a home. As corporate housing ownership is a growing problem nationwide, this is a move or a proposal that we have seen on several levels. Looking at Charlotte in particular, the issue of corporate-owned housing has received a lot of local but also national attention. A study found in 2023 that 26% of single-family homes were owned by corporations in Charlotte, but that's a 53% increase since 2010. Moving on to state updates. Last week, our Executive Director, Samuel Gunter, participated in a roundtable discussion on affordable housing with Governor Josh Stein. And this panel discussed and debated different aspects of housing affordability and the supply crisis, as well as different potential solutions. On the legislative side, as I mentioned earlier, the state House and Senate announced their conferees for state budget negotiations. So this is a Republican-led group of 34 senators and 45 representatives that their main focus will be to work to reconcile the differences between the House budget and the Senate budget, and there are significant differences. Among the issues of most contention are tax cuts and teacher pay, but as we continue to emphasize, one of our biggest priorities currently is making sure that the members understand the importance of restoring the Workforce Housing Loan Program, or the WELP, which is a critical affordable housing finance tool that makes housing possible across our entire state. As it stands, the House budget appropriates $5 million for the program, but only for the first year of the biennium, and the Senate budget doesn't include any funding for the program. For context, the previous biennium budget approved $70 million for the WELP program, so that's $35 million per year of the biennium. We've updated our bill tracker to reflect housing-related bills that survived crossover. You can check it out using the link in our call notes. That is the best way to find that bill tracker and the latest on those bills. Yesterday, on the disaster relief front, the Governor's Advisory Committee on Western North Carolina Recovery met to share updates on rebuilding and recovery efforts. The main thing we want to pull out is that the Single-Family Housing Repair and Replacement Program plans to accept applications beginning June 16th. So this is next Tuesday, and they will be accepting applications from June 16th through the end of the calendar year. So if you are in Western North Carolina, you work with organizations in Western North Carolina, please make sure to spread the word. As we get more information about this, we will do the same. Yesterday, the North Carolina Inclusive Disaster Recovery Network, or Insider, held a press event at the General Assembly. They held this press event to spotlight some of the unmet recovery needs in Western North Carolina and call for the additional funding. The North Carolina Inclusive Disaster Recovery Network event comes at a moment for policy and preparedness. And while state appropriations have supported important recovery work, there are still substantial gaps that remain, especially in housing, small business support, and public sector capacity to respond and rebuild. So some of the key issues for legislative action that were raised during the press event: on the housing front, there is significant need for rental and mortgage assistance for displaced residents. So far, only $1 million has been given for county DSS offices to provide rental assistance. On the economic recovery front, there's significant need for support for small businesses and unemployed workers. There's additional investment needed for public infrastructure, particularly for investment in FEMA and emergency management readiness, because we are already in the next hurricane season. And then on the mitigation and resilience front, there's need for investment on long-term rebuilding strategies that can help unite Western North Carolina and Eastern North Carolina, because it is completely unnecessary to pit the two regions against one another. Although the North Carolina House passed a Helene aid package in May, this has stalled out in the Senate, and leaders are tying disaster funding to the state budget, and it's being used as leverage in budget negotiations. So this is another advocacy opportunity to continue to push for these additional funding needs, and to not use this as leverage in state budget negotiations. The funding needs to continue to reach the communities in Western North Carolina. Pisgah Legal Services, Legal Aid of North Carolina, and the North Carolina Bar Foundation are hosting a Western North Carolina Disaster Recovery Hotline tomorrow, June 11th, from 12 to 6 p.m. This one-day hotline is intended to prioritize legal help for those with the most urgent needs. All the services are confidential and free, and interpreters will be available. The hotline number will only be answered on June 11th from 12 to 6 p.m. For non-disaster related legal needs. we'll include 2 links in the call notes for you. Moving on to events, reports, and resources. There are a lot of different events happening throughout the summer. Of course, we're in the thick of conference season. There is a webinar happening today from 2 to 3 p.m. From the Neighborhood Homes Coalition, talking about boosting housing supplies and the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. There's also another event happening on June 12th at 2:30 from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. It's talking about expanding community development financial institutions to new geographies and markets. And then the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits, which if you aren't already subscribed to their policy updates, have been doing a lot of great work helping nonprofits and organizations stay up to date on what policy at the federal and state level mean for nonprofits and different organizations. They'll be hosting a webinar titled One Big Beautiful Webinar on June 13th from 10 to 11:30 a.m. And this webinar in particular will discuss the details of provisions in the House passed bill that could affect charitable giving, nonprofit tax exemption, and federal benefits for people that are served by nonprofits, as well as possible changes to the bill in the Senate. So if any of those things kind of make your ears perk up or flagged you, make sure you check out that webinar on June 13th from 10 to 11:30 a.m. That's all we have for you this week. We have a few local headlines for you to check out, as well as other reports and resources. As always, please don't hesitate to reach out if you want us to focus on something in particular. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you next time.